Now we're moving on to other more serious issues. The now infamous no confidence vote that took place in the Guyana Parliament. This morning, we understand that the country will not be heading to the polls. Why? Well, it seems certain after what took place. If you missed the Charan Das Prasad vote that made its way all over social media, this is what took place, and this is what everyone thought will then send the country that is now the center of an economic discussion into the polls. That's what took place.
Mr. Rutherford?
No.
Mr. Rajkumar?
No.
Mr. C. Prasad?
Yes.
Mr. Figuera?
No. 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 Correct yourself. Correct it. No. No. Correct it now. No. No.
Mr. C. Prasad?
No. No.
Mr. C. Prasad?
No.
Said yes.
No.
Mr. Charan Das Prasad?
There you have the vote that everyone thought would send Guyana to the polls, but we understand that they will not be heading to the polls. In our regional connection this morning, we have the Director of Public Information, Imran Khan, joining us on the line this morning out of Guyana. Imran, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Eva. Thank you very much for having me on the program. Well, thank you.
Now, the first question, it seemed as a set event. After that, now infamous clip, and I can't describe it, all of the allegations going back and forth, that Guyana would be heading to the polls. I understand that that is not going to happen. What exactly transpired?
Well, elections are constitutionally due in 2020, so I expect that we will be heading to the polls at some point between now and that time. Specifically regarding your question is that there have been some issues which have arisen since that December 21 vote, which are now before the courts, and we are awaiting the interpretation and the ruling of the courts before proceeding. So effectively, the issue is in abeyance. The clip that you played, of course, would have been from December 21 when there was that vote. At the end of that session, the Speaker, Dr. Barton Scotland of our National Assembly, indicated that we will reconvene on January 3rd to examine the consequences of the vote. And when Parliament reconvened on January 3rd, the Speaker indicated that he had received a number of opinions, both solicited and unsolicited, which gave him reason to pause. And there were a couple of issues which were brought to his attention. He indicated that he did have the power to reverse his decision, but did not take the invitation to do so on that occasion, and effectively asked that the courts provide a full and final interpretation on the matter. So there are two matters before the courts at the moment. One was brought by the government, which is as it relates to the majority, the threshold that is required to activate such a motion. And as you know, we have a 65-member parliament, and our government has a very slim one-seat majority.
Right. So
the member on the government side having effectively voted with the opposition would have meant that the vote was 33-32 in favor of the opposition. And there is a very strong view on our side that the threshold needed was not 33, but is actually 34, and there's a number of precedents across the world to support that. Some very compelling precedents across the world.
You say that.
And there's another action that was brought by a private citizen with regard to the actual legitimacy of the vote. The issue being that member is a dual citizen and has sworn allegiance to a foreign power. And our Constitution doesn't permit for someone who would have sworn allegiance to a foreign power to sit in the National Assembly. So those two matters are before the court, and we are awaiting the rulings before moving ahead.
Imran, is it simply a stalling tactic by the government? If it is that, you say that there's precedent and the courts, is it a stalling tactic through the courts to just simply extend the tomb to the 2020 deadline?
Well, I don't look at it that way. I think that there was a meeting on January 9 between the president and the leader of the opposition and their respective teams from government and the leader of the office of the opposition. And there was agreement. In fact, the leader of the opposition publicly stated that he believed that the government needs to be in place and that the president is in place, and agreed 100% with that. I think there is consensus on both sides that we await the ruling of the court. We can't move ahead without the ruling of the court. And it would be irresponsible in any effect for the government or for the president to move ahead outside of the ruling of the court. So a duly elected majority government would have to ensure that it explores its options before moving ahead. So it's not a stalling tactic at all. We're actually in an unprecedented waters. We haven't been here before. We haven't been down this road. So it is, in fact, as was ruled by the Speaker, the best option for the courts to deliberate on the matter and to give a full and final ruling.
Right, if it requires, and this is just breaking down to layman terms, Scan, if it takes 33 to 32 to pass a vote, then why do you need 34 to say that, or any other number to declare that vote valid?
Well, there are three majorities in our National Assembly. There's a two-thirds majority, which I think you're aware of. It's a common majority, particularly in the Commonwealth, which is required mainly for constitutional changes. There is another majority, which is a simple majority, which is a majority of all members present and voting on that particular day. But this particular issue, the confidence motion, requires a majority of all elected members. And because our National Assembly has 65, to get that majority, you believe you have to divide by 2, which then gives you 32.5. But because there is no half member, there is no 0.5 member, the precedent around the world has been that you round up to 33 and then you add 1 to get the majority, which is 34. That is as simply as I can put it in layman's terms. Of course, I'm not an attorney, but that is my understanding of the precedent and the case that we have made before the courts with regard to 34. And as I said earlier, there's very compelling evidence all across the world that that is the threshold that is required in a parliament where you have an odd number. There are cases in Vanuatu, there are cases in Anguilla, there are cases in Kenya, a number of jurisdictions across the world.
I know the government has put forward their case and the courts will decide. I asked you if it's a stalling tactic, you said no. So obviously the election will not be held before the 2020 date. Is that correct? Because if we look at the state, if we look at the wheels of justice, and I've looked at some of the timelines predicted, and you said there are 2 matters, not just one. So we can say that Guyana will not go to the polls before 2020.
Well, I wouldn't be able to say that definitively. The courts could bring back their decision, and if it is that they decide that 33 is what is needed and the other matter is dispensed with, then the Constitution is clear that we are to go to elections within 3 months. Of course, that would also be dependent on whether our elections authority, GCOM is what it's called, the Guyana Elections Commission, is prepared for elections. And we note that in 2014, before this government actually came into office, that they had indicated at that time, and I believe that that still holds, that they need 6 months to prepare for any unscheduled elections. So I wouldn't be able to say definitively that there will be no elections before 2020. That obviously will be dependent on how soon the court rules and what they rule.
Now, let me also ask you this. You know, when politicians use, and this is a political game, and you are also speaking on behalf of the government of Guyana this time, What are the people saying? Guyana has been known to have violent outbursts in relation to its electoral politics and its electoral machinery. What is the temperature on the ground at this point? Because after that vote, I was convinced, before I went on vacation in December, that we would have to send a team to Guyana in 3 months to cover an election. So if I am as shocked, what are the people, what are the supporters of the parties saying in Guyana this time?
Well, we'd love to have you and your team here. We look forward to that, election or no election, But people are getting on with their business. Life continues as per normal. Obviously, this is a national issue. It's an issue that people are paying very keen attention to. But I believe there is consensus that we await the outcome of the court. The matter has been explained to the public on all sides, by the government, by the opposition, by civil society. A number of people have given their views as what ought to have been done and what ought not to have been done. There are different views, but there seems to be general consensus that we await the ruling of the court. We are a robust democracy. We respect the courts and their need, their role, and the need for them to give their input. And life continues as per normal. We've had our challenges, like as Trinidad and Tobago and other societies, but we are a robust democracy, and we are a growing and expanding democracy, and people respect the courts, and we as a government do as well. And I believe that the opposition also recognizes the role of the court. In fact, at that meeting that I referred to earlier between the president and the opposition leader, two teams were put together, two-person teams, one with our Attorney General and the former Attorney General, now opposition member of Parliament, with regard to exploring the possibility of the matter being dealt with expeditiously, and two other members, the chief whips on both sides in the National Assembly, seeking to understand from the electoral authority their readiness and preparedness for elections. So there's maturity on all sides, and I believe that we will get through this in a mature manner.
You're confident of that. Will, what is the status of Parliament?
All indications at the moment are that we will get through it in a mature manner.
Will Parliament continue to meet?
There's no protest or any other indicators that we would get through it in any other way.
Will Parliament continue to meet while you await this decision of the court? And then obviously with Mr. Prasad's vote, the power dynamic in the Guyana Parliament has changed. So how will bills be passed? How will the business of the people of Guyana be dealt with?
No, the dynamic in Parliament hasn't actually changed.
So Parliament will continue to meet?
It has reverted to what it was, because he actually resigned as a parliamentarian. We've replaced him, so we maintain the majority, though it still remains a one-seat majority. And Parliament hasn't been dissolved, so the business of Parliament will continue until such time that it is dissolved.
Your closing comments, Imran Khan, you are the Director of Public Information attached to the state and the government of Guyana. People are looking, and there's a little bit of confusion. You said that this was maturity. When I don't know if it's the jaded parts of our Trinidad politics, but when people hear maturity and in the best interest, was there a deal that was struck between both parties?
Well, I don't want to cast any aspersions on Trinidadian politics, but I think we're far off from where you are, CARICOM sister is. I believe it is not an issue of a deal struck per se, but it is maturity on all sides, and I think that was most evident, and I think it was a good sign to the nation when the leader of the opposition and the president met and had a healthy meeting, had a mature meeting, and coming out of that, I think that the nation has been assured that we'll approach this in a respectful and in a mature manner. And I think that people are pleased, very pleased, with the nature of that meeting and how it went ahead.
Imran Khan, thanks so much for taking our call. And I know that we made the arrangements very late. And I do hope the next time that we can have you in studio, we can be in Guyana having this conversation. Thank you again, Director of Public Information attached to the government of Guyana, giving the information.